यह ज्ञान की दुनिया, यहाँ दुनिया का ज्ञान, कृषि विज्ञान और अनुसंधान, नए क्षितिज अब छू रही शिक्षा, ऑनलाइन पढ़ाई संग लग रही कक्षा.
Welcome you to the first panel discussion for the International Conference on Blended Learning Ecosystem. And it is my great pleasure to invite the chairs, moderators, and panelists for this session. I cordially invite the co-chairs of the session, Dr. S.N. Jha, Deputy Director General, Agricultural Engineering, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, to come on the dais and take its seat, along with Dr. P.S. Pandey, Vice Chancellor, Central Agriculture University, Bihar, to also join Dr. Jha on the stage, please. I cordially invite the moderator, Dr. Surinder Singh Chauhan, Senior Lecturer from Animal Science, School of Agriculture and Food, the University of Melbourne, Australia. And I invite the rapporteurs to be alert to take the notes, Dr. Ashraful Haq and Dr. Samarth Godra, from the scientists from the Indian Agricultural Statistical Research Institute. I cordially invite all the panelists, Dr. J.C. Katyal, former Deputy Director General, Agricultural Education, ICR, and former Vice Chancellor, CCS, Hisar Agriculture University, to please join the dais. I invite Dr. Klaus Rainer Meikelink, Head of Teaching and Learning Services, University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, Vienna, to Austria, to join on stage. I invite Dr. Siddhas Solnias, Lecturer, UMBC, Information Systems Department, Maryland, USA. I also invite Dr. Bashir Ahmed Sadra, Director, Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia, New Delhi, to please come on stage. I invite Dr. G. Sugumar, Vice Chancellor, International University of Business, Agriculture and Technology, Dhaka, Bangladesh, to join amongst the panelists. I invite Dr. Purna Gunasekara, Associate Dean, International Peninsula Medical School, University of Plymouth, United Kingdom, to also step on stage. And we welcome Dr. Garth Marker, Associate Professor and President of the University of Academic Council, Murdoch University, Australia, who is joining us online. Before I hand over the stage to our moderator, Dr. Surinder Singh Chauhan, I have the pleasant announcement that after the sumptuous lunch, you are cordially invited to another sumptuous dinner in the evening. It is not marked in the program, but do join us in the same venue where you have had the lunch. Now we begin the technical session, panel discussion on exploring effective strategies of blended learning for higher education in agriculture. I am taking the place of Dr. Vimlesh Maan, who was supposed to convene this session but has been called away for another meeting. My name is Dr. Anuradha Agrawal. I'm the National Coordinator of the Component 2 NAHEP, under which this conference and the platform is being developed. Before I hand over the stage to Dr. Chauhan, I will take the opportunity to introduce our distinguished co-chairs. We have Dr. S.N. Jha, the DDG Agriculture Engineering, ICR. Earlier, he has served as the Assistant Director General, Process Engineering in the same department in ICR. His major areas of professional interest and achievements are non-destructive methods of quality evaluation of foods, development of new food products or process, and machinery design and development of storage structures for fruits and vegetables. According to Stanford University USA study for the year 2019, Dr. Jha is listed as amongst the top 2% scientists across all disciplines of research in the world. He's a fellow of the National Agricultural Academy of Sciences, Indian Society of Agricultural Engineers, and many more professional societies. He was awarded with the prestigious ICR Rafi Ahmad Kidwai Award, one of the most coveted awards of ICR. I also take the pleasure of introducing Dr. P.S. Pandey. He is currently the Vice Chancellor of Central Agricultural University of Bihar. Prior to this, he has served as Assistant Director General, Education Planning and Home Science, as well as Education Quality Assurance and Reforms at ICR in New Delhi. He has also served as the National Coordinator of the Organization and Management Component of World Bank-sponsored National Agricultural Innovation Project during 2011 to 15. Dr. Pandey has more than 30 years of experience in agricultural research and education, where he successfully planned and executed several policies for ensuring quality education. I also would like to introduce the moderator of this session, Dr. Surinder Singh Chauhan, Senior Lecturer, Animal Science, School of Agriculture and Food, the University of Melbourne, Australia. Dr. Chauhan has more than 15 years of track record of research and teaching in veterinary and animal sciences in 3 countries, including Australia, India, and USA. Dr. Chauhan is also the recipient of the UOM India Engagement Seed Grant 2020 and has been collaborating with ICR institutes and Indian agricultural universities to promote sustainable intensification of integrated crop livestock systems for improving smallholder livelihoods. I will leave the job of introducing the panelists to our moderator, and I hand over the session to you, Dr. Chauhan.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to host the post-panel discussion on exploring effective strategies of blending learning for higher education in agriculture. Before we start this panel discussion, let me introduce our members of this panel, and my pleasure to introduce Dr. Katyal. He is the former Deputy Director General, Agriculture Education, and former Vice Chancellor, Hisar Agriculture University, India. He is one of the most learned research scholars in the domain of soil sciences. He has been an advocate in pushing forward the agenda of adaptation of new technologies in agriculture higher education. He is also recipient of several international recognitions and fellow of NAS. Dr. Katyal, welcome, please. Mr. Klaus Rainer Michalik, he is the head of Teaching and Learning Services, the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, Vienna, Austria. He has served as the head of Unit E-Learning and Didactics at the Center for Teaching and Learning in Vienna. He's known for his eloquent perspective on the new perspectives of scientific research and education. Next panel member, Dr. Siddhas Solinas. Dr. Solinas is lecturer at the University of Maryland, Baltimore Information System Department, Maryland, USA. He's one of the leading thinkers in the field of the use of information system to foster education and other services across various streams. It's my pleasure to welcome another panel member, Dr. Bashir Ahmed Sadraj. So Dr. Sadraj is the Serving Director of the Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia, New Delhi. He is an expert on implementable effective strategies to impart higher education. He's an advocate of value-based education. It's my pleasure to welcome another panel member, Dr. Abdul Rauf Ria. Dr. Mia is the Vice Chancellor of International University of Business, Agriculture and Technology, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Professor Rao was a professor and the director Institute of Business Administration, Dhaka University. He's the former president of the Association of Management Institution in South Asia. He's a fellow of the Institute of Management Consultant of Bangladesh and served as its chairperson. It's my pleasure to welcome another panel member, Dr. Suguma. He is the Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu Fisheries University, India. He is an FAO Fellow under Agriculture Human Resource Development Project for his work on molecular diagnostics at the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory of Texas A&M University in USA. He was conferred with the Best Teacher Award by the Professional Fisheries Graduates Forum, Mumbai in the year 2003, 2008, 2011. He has been appreciative of the use of technology to impart very relevant agriculture higher education. It's my pleasure to welcome another panel member, Dr. Purna Gunasekara. He is our next panelist, and he is the Associate Dean, International Peninsula Medical School, University of Plymouth, UK. He has worked with a wide array of students from different streams. His current research is about empowering individuals and communities to have greater control over their own health. This was also evident from his TED Talk in 2018 on the legacy of cell discovery. He's going to share his experiences with us, especially when we come to the discussion regarding the new strategies being implemented in higher education. Last but not the least, my friend from Australia, Garth. We won't talk about cricket today. We'll keep it for next time. Dr. Garth Maker is Associate Professor and President of the University Academic Council, Murdoch University. He's joining us virtually from Australia. Thanks, mate. I know it's too late. Dr. Maker is a leading researcher in the field of biochemistry. He has been using many blended tools for sharing research and new developmental studies. Can I request everyone to join me to welcome all our panelists at the panel discussion, please. So to start with, as we know, we all understand and we all are interested, and that's why we are here, that blended education is going to play a very important role in higher education. And of course, we are talking about agriculture education here. And those of you, my colleagues from different countries that we have joined today, it is amazing that even the first panel discussion, we've got 6 countries being represented. Well done, good job, Dr. Agrawal and team, to putting together a panel from different countries so we can have a perspective what is working best in different countries when it comes to blended education. So we all have been very excited about this blending system, but I have to be honest with you, because we have been doing it at University of Melbourne for a few years now. It is a great tool, but of course there are some challenges as well. But good thing is, especially for Indian Council of Agriculture Research, that you are working with some of the top universities in the world, and World Bank is supporting this initiative. So you have a great opportunity to plan well. What are the things which is working for others? You just follow those things so you don't have to, go through the challenges that some of those countries have already gone through. So to start with the discussion, and that's exactly what I'm going to focus on, one of the challenges that personally I know is how to keep students engaged when it becomes, it's online system or it's a blended system. One of the biggest challenge is that how do we keep students engaged and motivated in a blended learning environment. So if I can start with my colleague, Dr. Katyal, can I have your opinion on how can we keep the students engaged and motivated?
Is it working?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I thought that I will make my presentation slightly different. Before that, I'll make a few comments.
Yes.
And then I come to your questions.
Sure.
And you need not raise the questions with me. I have written down them.
Yep.
I will speak one by one.
Okay, sir.
If you like, I can come there and speak.
All right, come on, sir. Yep, sure.
Okay. यहाँ से बैठने में खड़े हो. Okay, please.
One thing. I will just request to all the panelists that we should restrict the time because already we are 15 minutes of this session has gone. We have to finish by 5 p.m. So not more than 6 to 7 minutes. One panelist should.
Yep.
Thank you very much, honorable co-chairs, fellow panelists, moderator, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I have major focus actually on point 8, but I will answer many of the questions.
Yep.
And before I proceed with my presentation, as a panelist on the deliberations of the session name is Exploring Effective Strategies of Blended Learning for Higher Education Agriculture. This is the session. I briefly describe the steps of strategy planning pathway. There is a first thing should be discussed is that what should be strategy planning actually all about. And according to me, there are 4 steps of strategy planning pathway. First is environment scanning or situation analysis. What is called need analysis. That should be the first one to be made. Second, strategy formulation, which means what need to be addressed. What is our goal? What is the goal of this session? That is my second point. Third is scripting a strategy implementation plan, how we are going to achieve it. And my fourth point is strategy for monitoring and evaluation, whether the goals and objectives of strategic plan on blended learning are achieved or not. These are the 4 parameters which the strategy planning involves actually. And I will speak hereafter now. And also I would emphasize that in my comments, I would use the terms like ICT, Information and Communication Technology. I will use tech-mediated learning. I will use the term online learning. By analogy, I mean to support a blended learning platform. That's the whole thing. The first question which is raised is ways to keep students engaged and motivated to blended learning. This is the first question. And I make clear that out of 8 questions you have raised, I have answered only 6. 2 I have not answered. Please bear with me that. And the requirements for engaging the students in blended learning, the first and foremost would be the teacher must know the students' capabilities, that what kind of students he is going to engage with. And this will help upskilling students' capacity related to tech-mediated education. It will also facilitate preparing students' mindset and interest in tech-mediated education. This is the first comment I make. My second comment is availability of and accessibility to glitch-free online technology. This is very important, that people should have access to good technology. My third point is availability of teachers who are fully trained in tech-mediated teaching that inspires students' confidence in tech-mediated learning. My next point is fourthly, and most importantly, refining and adapting conventional teaching content to blended learning context. And for fifthly and last point is on this question, acquired or inherent ability of teachers to apply a range of technologies, multiple media. They should use that for delivering instruction material. These are my 5 first points for the answering that question. The second question which I have asked, which you have raised, does online learning complement traditional learning? That's the question. And yes, I say yes, it complements by enabling real-time tracking of students' progress. As we are teaching, we can know the students are progressing well or not. That is the first, and thus helping make mid-course corrections. We can make mid-course corrections, whether these are needed or not. Second also is yes, tech-mediated learning facilities, making students future-ready for participating in technology-intensive platforms. This is going to the future, actually. Technology-intensive platforms are going to the future, so this helps in preparing that. Yes, it helps in enhancing teachers' training and development. Tech-mediated learning actually does that also. And my last point is no. If the lessons require hands-on training or experiential learning, then tech-mediated may be, or blended learning may be somewhat wanting. That's my fourth point. Now I come to the next question. How can educators ensure that online learning activities align with learning objectives? This is a very important question. And this is achieved by planning tasks and activities that are supported by preset learning outcomes according to relevancy. We should set our goals beforehand according to the relevancy or need of the education. And second point is by regular evaluation of courses matching progressive growth of students for serving the cause of employability and other things. That is the second point. And third is by defining indicators that ensure outcome of objectives is attainable and measurable. This is important that we should be able to do that. And my fourth point in this is by delivering knowledge and skills content that is transmitted through a very concise and student-friendly language. Language must be very concise when you're delivering the lectures online. And promoting knowledge and sharing in the ecosystem of blended learning. This is the point. Tech-mediated learning offers a huge opportunity by nurturing knowledge-sharing culture as it happens for its sports, interactive teaching and learning. I suggest evolving a blended learning management setup. This is my recommendation for this. And e-learning strategies promote online discussions as these happen effortlessly. They are happening, actually, interactive. I propose to introduce participatory teaching and learning system to improve knowledge sharing. This is my second recommendation on this. And my fifth question which you raised, teachers training to effectively incorporate technology and design in blended learning. Teachers training is the most important strategy. I believe this is the most important strategy, as this investment is not only for today, but for the future also, but for tomorrow also. Effectivity of teachers will increase if their training inspires them to make students at the epicenter of learning. Students should be the epicenter of learning when they're doing that. My second point is training is also necessary for the teachers to build ability to link face-to-face and virtual learning. If they have built that ability, they can do both physical education and online education. And they can pair classroom presentations with follow-up online small group discussions. And next point is training helps boosting teacher-staff interactivity. This is very important, actually. This is with technology it is happening. And training helps create capacity for development of interactive resources like online games as these build skills and for the future. So these are the points which I answered to these five questions. And my sixth comment is for which I will spend a little more time. Application of e-learning platform for effectively utilizing to enhance knowledge and skills of farmers and other stakeholders. I think this is my recommendation, Dr. Jindal Prasad. This should have been actually a separate session altogether. This is so important in my assessment. My comments on this question are inspired by one of the two objectives of the ICBLE 2023, which you people have listed. They aim at harmonizing learning needs of all stakeholders. This is, in a nutshell, the objective which is set. Most important stakeholders of education are, of course, students, teachers, farmers, parents, public at large, private sector, and several other people. And of these, I relate my observations only to farming community. I am concentrating on that. And my centering on farming community originates from my thesis that the scientific manpower, which is developed by agriculture education, works for nurturing the sustenance of this section of stakeholders. That is actually the education, what education does. And more importantly, public funding is primarily directed for the betterment of life and living of farmers. Actually, what government makes investments, they are for the farmers actually. They betterment of farmers' life and living. It is said so since technological innovations evolved by scientists who are the product of agriculture education help in increasing productivity and profitability of agriculture enterprise. Extension agents are intermediaries who transfer information, new knowledge, and know-how to farmers. This approach has paid dividends in the past And because it took, not only it increased farm income and profitability, but it pulled India out of the schools of food deficit state of 1960-70 to food self-sufficiency that day after. And so role of extension was more promoting input use at that point in time, early 60s and 70s. Role of extension was more of promoting input use, and that mass of available manpower to perform that job was adequate. That they wanted to increase the input use so that productivity can be enhanced. But with time, technological needs became increasingly complex and knowledge intensive to sustain productivity and profitability of farming. Coincidentally, the quality of extension workers weakened and their numbers became inadequate. In India, there are 146 million farm holders and about 120 primary extension workers to serve them. It means there are 1,200 farm families being served by one extension worker. The accepted norm is 750. Not only that, the available extension manpower is burdened more with tasks not related necessarily to technology transfer, but to other jobs, many other jobs. According to NSSO data, National Sample Survey Organization data, many of the small farmers and women farmers who have seldom chance to receive any advice from an extension officer. Resultantly, only about 40% of the new information reaches farmers from all sources of communications. By and by, weakening IT apparatus has made agriculture a more expensive and less profitable enterprise. The situation is like this, that 40% of the farmers is given alternative. They would like to leave farming. And now I link it with the blended learning. This was background on the extension. On all counts, I can say that conventional technology transfer practice is grossly inadequate. The extension mediated. And here comes the need for supplementary capacity of knowledge building economy of farming community, utilizing the extensive disseminating potential of tech-mediated education, and that too without the barriers of time and space. I can say this aspect discussed in the education division along with Commonwealth of Learning in 2005. This is not a new subject to us, so we know that. And there are results. Tech-mediated learning is found wondrous, but supporting real-time decision-making. There is data. Gandhi and others indicated that ICT tools increased adoption of certain green revolution practices, green technology, green agriculture practices, 7-fold over conventional agriculture extension. Very, very significant. And further, 85% adoption of improved technologies was achieved as against only 11% adoption of the traditional extension method. Results of another study from Oxford University showed greater number of farmers having rated ICT more useful, faster, and of better quality. Villages with better infrastructure, transport, reported superior ICT services. These were important parameters, that electricity is important, the transport is important. So, and finally, it is a fact that power of ICT is currently underutilized in agriculture in India. There is absolutely no doubt, as I'm finishing. Scaling of delivery remains far from satisfactory. My suggestion is to include capacity building infrastructure and education of extension workers who have capacity to utilize ICT in all its shades. Building farmers' interest through awareness and education about the use of ICT tools will be necessary to maximize potential application of blended learning. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Katyal, for your extensive response to all the key points that we were going to discuss today. Next, I'm going to Garth, if you can hear me. Given that you have been working on developing different blended tools for sharing research and new development studies, I would like to know from you that in terms of designing the blended learning, learning activities, how do we make sure that these complements rather than conflict the student learning and engagement? And that is part of also how to design effectively the blended learning activities. Garth? Garth, can you hear me? Garth, I can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry, I was just waiting for my microphone to be unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Garth.
Thank you very much.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think we've touched on some of the key points already, but from my experience, I think the most important thing in designing these learning activities, as has already been said, is ensuring that we're designing for the appropriate approach for the specific task. So, for example, laboratory activities we find very difficult to replicate in the blended environment, but data handling type activities are in fact very useful to teach in a blended environment. I think the use of different forms of technology that are appropriate for the activity seems to be key. And also ensuring that students have a clear understanding of the purpose of the activity in which they're being asked to engage. We, as a sector, were extremely flexible during the COVID-19 pandemic, and unfortunately, in some respects, we were possibly too flexible because students have very much adapted to the blended approach, which means that their expectations of what we offer them in blended learning have become quite high. And so that's a continuing challenge for the sector, certainly across Australia, and I'm sure in other parts of the world as well. So finding that balance for students of engagement through clear expectations and also through well-designed activities. Activities do not have to be perfect. There's so many of my colleagues will often spend a very long time designing an activity because they wish it to be absolutely top notch. And while we support that, we find that students actually, they don't have an expectation that the blended learning activity is going to be perfect. What they want to see is a genuine activity that is designed by people who are experts in that particular field, and that they feel is translating to them the key aspects of the knowledge and skills that they need to develop. So I think for me, the key points are designing the appropriate activity for the specific learning outcomes, using the range of technologies that we have available to us, and ensuring that students understand the purpose and the goals of the particular activity.
You mentioned a very good point there, that make sure that it aligns with the learning outcomes and learning objectives. So that's going to be my next question, and that is to start with Dr. Purna Gunasekara. So what are your strategies, or what do you suggest that how can the educator they design the program so that that aligns with the student learnings?
Thank you. So blended learning has two components. There is the face-to-face component, and then there is the online component. And the online component, if at all, has exploded in the recent times due to COVID. So that was a kind of development that was not the normal systematic approach we would take in developing any tool. So how do we combine these two, a very traditional system of face-to-face with a recently exploded level of technology, and then look at its value to agriculture? When we try to strategize, the most important element here is that when we talk of blended learning, it has the component of the student not only requiring to take the content, for instance, in agriculture, the market technology, as much as the market information and the technological information, but they also have to become digitally literate as time goes on. Yeah. And that is a challenge. And therefore, it must be progressive. We have to recognize that the student who's entering this, be it on a full-time higher education basis or a part-time vocational training basis, they need to come up to speed in technology as much as they're absorbing the content that should be there. So that progressive learning is, I think, what Gareth said in the form of making it relevant to learning outcomes. Therefore, the learning outcomes must be progressive. And we must be sure that what needs to be delivered face-to-face needs to be delivered face-to-face. And one of the key components in education per se are these things called threshold concepts. Threshold concepts are things that are so important that they are life-changing. And it's almost like making a blind person see. And when you begin to see, you can't unsee. You can't reverse a threshold. Right. And therefore, when we are dealing with this split form of face-to-face and online, we must be careful that thresholds must be delivered face-to-face, because it requires a rapport between the provider and the recipient to see whether that understanding is there. But the big advantage we have, what the strategy we use is the flipped classroom strategy, yes, whereby we use online material to kind of prompt a person to come to a baseline understanding, and then at the point of face-to-face discussion, it is moderated in such a way that we guide the students through the thresholds. And then we apply it. So the beauty is we learn the theory on self-directed basis, then we analyze the theory, almost talking of Bloom's taxonomy, having understood it, having remembered it. Now we analyze and break it into component parts before we can make it in our own, and then form an identity with it. And that could be done. And then we can use online for optional consolidation, things that can happen later. So that is the strategy we have. Right. Just in a nutshell, to prompt the people to come to a baseline understanding of the content, analyze it using face-to-face discussions, and follow with consolidation that could be online.
Thank you very much, Dr. Senegra. If I go to Dr. Salenias, do you like to add a few things to that?
I think one of the keys that we need to consider, whether we are trying to engage our students in a traditional environment or a blended environment, I think the one thing that is in common of both environments, all environments, is the need to hide. And students, if we're going to keep them engaged, we have to find ways for students who want to hide to choose not to hide. And when, there's basically two types of students that I see that would want to hide. Those who really don't want to be engaged and do not care about the material and are engaged in a class because they have no choice, and those who might want to engage but are too shy. So how do we do this in a regular environment? A quick story. I was part of an international study tour with my old university, where I was the chaperone, not the main lecturer. The main lecturer tried to engage the students during one of the classes by asking an open-ended question, and all you heard was crickets. So what do you think of this? What about this? Grivet, grivet, grivet. After that one class, I came to him, it's like, when you do this tomorrow for tomorrow's class, instead of asking them directly, get them in little groups and have the groups come up with an answer. That engagement was much better the second time around. So as a general rule, if somebody doesn't want to engage or if somebody is too shy to initiate, if you engage them in groups, they're more likely to produce a positive response. This is true in either environment, I believe. And this is just one example that I'd like to offer. But the idea is they're hiding for a reason. What can we do to make them want to come out of hiding? And of course, in an online environment, it is much easier to hide, and that is one of our biggest challenges.
Thank you. I think now we have the opportunity to hear a perspective from Austria. So, Ms. Schleck, if you want to basically two questions together, we talked about, which is part of our designing, that how do you design these activities so they are engaging, but then also make sure they align with the learning outcomes. And also, so I'm just trying to throw all three questions together to you. So, yep, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. I try to answer them combined. So what's most relevant for us, that's what our teachers are trained in, is constructive alignment. So it's most important in a way that's the intended learning outcomes, the teaching and the activities and the assessment all aligns. And that's very important, and normally teachers don't, in a way you have to teach them, and also you have to teach the teacher to write good learning outcomes. And in that way, that the assessment is really testing what you have been taught. And also, and it was said already about the expectations about the students. So the students know the concept in a way, so you're quite open and transparent to them. So then they also are engaged in a way. But of course, there might be a little danger that students learn just for the exams in a way. Therefore, you really have to design your activities that they're engaged in the learning and not just concentrating on the examination in the end. But I see this danger because students have very little time, I know, and we heard it already, they are also part-time working, so they really have to optimize the learning time, and therefore they try to, well, they're masters in optimizing things. Yes, we have to face this. Yeah. Is this an answer?
Thank you. I think we can have some experience or some perspective from our colleagues from India here. So, Dr. Sugumar, if I can start with you, your ideas or strategies in terms of designing the activities so there is better engagement, they align with their learning outcomes. What would you like to say?
Thank you. Before going into the answer directly, I would like to say that the higher education landscape in India is quite demanding in the sense that as of 2019-20, about 29.5 million UG enrollments had taken place, of which the agriculture, now we are talking about agriculture, higher education, agriculture, animal husbandry and veterinary, including fisheries, contribute only about 0.29 million enrollments, which means that the rest of the things are going to science, arts, and commerce subjects, which is a major chunk of about 20.29, engineering about 3.72, and the rest of the things by diploma, certificate, and so on and so forth. But in all the cases, when you have to make certain things effective, we have to, think more on capacity building of the teachers to whichever mode they take. As pointed out by our Australian colleague, we have to understand the purpose for which it is being designed. The pedagogy for both either the face-to-face or online modes is that first we have to generate ideas on concepts that is going to be taught. So both the teacher and the taught should understand what is the idea behind teaching that subject. Then maybe either by flip or rotation mode or whatever mode you do, maybe synchronous or asynchronous in face-to-face or an online education, you can think about a sort of brainstorming which would help the students engage themselves directly into designing even the program. So that is what. So that the mind mapping of the students is far-fetched than the teachers. So we will be able to arrive at certain activities that would make them more enthusiastic because no one design is going to fit all. It is going to be like, if the students are engaged, then maybe we will come out with some creative presentations. And the facilitator or the teacher's role there would be to, give some case study to expose them to the real world. So finally, we can come out with the learning strategies so that they take home in the right way. So for which, as I said, there are certain systems that have been in place in developed countries or some of the nations who have already thought about it. Like in the USA, we have got the Educator Preparatory Program, EPP, to prepare the future teachers to be successful in new digital learning environments. Whereas in our Indian ecosystem, we are having a very good system. Like, for example, we have today morning we have launched by our Honorable Minister about empowering agricultural higher education through next generation learning solutions. These are all just coming up. So we do not have a system which would make teachers adapt to this new learning environment. So unless and otherwise we establish a sort of mechanism by which our teachers are also getting exposed. This is there even in the case of United Kingdom. We have got there is what is called as a Joint Academic Network, JANET network, which has a digital elevation tool for online self-assessment. Only after going through, the teachers are engaged in this process of blended learning. Even in China, we have got what is called as National Smart Education Program on vocational education and skill-based education. Whereas here, our teachers are trying to deliver the same content of both in the face-to-face as well as in the delivery. I'm generalizing it, but there are cases wherein unless and otherwise we make a sort of framework within which we empower our people or educate our teachers to make the right approach. This agricultural higher education, wherein we blend these two, may not be, because it requires a lot of hands-on. So we have to come out with strategies rather and make it mandatory by a system controlled at the national level. That's my input.
Thank you. Dr. Shadraj, would you like to add from the Indian perspective on that?
I can add from the Indian perspective. 19 years ago, it's quite nostalgic that in the other hall, Shinde Hall, I assisted Professors M.S. Swaminathan and Professor Abdul Kalam to launch something called the Mission 2007 Every Village a Knowledge Center program. And 19 years down the lane, we are still discussing the blended learning practices. And it's interesting that in 2004, the conception was all about blended. How do we engage people at the grassroots through knowledge systems that would respond to their needs? And how in this scheme of things, we could include the academia in terms of adding value. Now, Commonwealth of Learning, which was mentioned by Dr. Katyal a little while ago, is an organization that was founded solely for blended learning in 1987, 36 years ago. An organization was created by the Commonwealth heads of states in Vancouver to solely work on blended learning, open, distance, blended, technology-enabled learning. And I'm happy that I'm representing that organization. And I just spoke to Dr. Joshua from Malawi, who is here, and we have loads of examples and experiences in initiating blended learning work. You mentioned about future teachers, somebody mentioned about future teachers, numerous MOOCs that we run together with IIT Kanpur and a consortium of agriculture universities in this country. We run Mobi MOOC solely for the grassroots people who have very feature phones as the access means to actually develop financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and innovation skills. With Tamil Nadu Grama Bank, we are working with millions of farmers who have borrowed money from the Grama Bank. And we are having a systematic training and learning program for them to enable them to maximize that money that they've borrowed so that they can repay but also build their livelihood. And as we speak, you would be glad to know that with the Association of Indian Universities, we are working with 1,000 vice chancellors in this country to come up with a national blended learning policy. And I'm actually traveling to Meghalaya tomorrow to meet up with 400 vice chancellors who are going to be assembled at USTM to initiate this thought process. And we have set up a subcommittee to draft the national blended learning policy. We have also come out with a MOOC on blended learning practice, which would be solely available for the faculty members of universities who are now switching over from face-to-face to blended mode of teaching and learning. So this MOOC, together with Athabasca University in Canada, Calgary, we have developed, which is run in various cycles, and we have run 8 cycles of this MOOC, and the 9th cycle is likely to be launched soon. It's an 8-week learning program solely for the faculty members who do not have the skills to actually engage. And you had a lot of questions, Mr. Chauhan, in your email correspondence with us, and our MOOC answers every single one of those. Okay. Right from what is blended learning to the various models of blended learning to blended learning policy derivatives to how to engage students, how to assess students online, and finally how to assess the efficacy of blended learning techniques in the lives of academic community. So we have a range of experiences, and I'm extremely pleased that this morning, the representative from the World Bank, particularly Denis Mikalau, who mentioned that, in the higher education framework that they have, what they call STEER, there is this aspect of looking at not only the traditional, courses that my colleague Dr. Sukumar mentioned, which pertains to engineering, commerce, humanities, and so on, but he also mentioned about agriculture and TVET. So if you look at the systems, it looks like the mainstream universities are embracing blended learning after the school system that is embraced quite easily, and in the emergency teaching scenario during COVID, the schools were the first ones to embrace blended learning, followed by the traditional universities, particularly private universities that have had the infrastructure. But when it comes to TVET and other institutions, we had some troubles, largely not because the technology was not available, largely because the capacity was not there, particularly amongst the faculty members. They replicated what they would do in a face-to-face onto an online system. Blend is not replicating face-to-face onto online and video lecturing. Blend is much more than that.
Yep.
So we have a lot of experience we are willing to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's good to know, actually, the number of initiatives that are being taken. If I can go to Professor Abdul Rab Mia, if you can share some of the perspectives, for example, in Bangladesh, how you are planning for blended learning, or in terms of designing or making sure that, these plans, they align with the learning objectives. So I'm coming to have your opinion on those questions.
Thank you. Well, the necessity for blended learning was realized when our country got into the lockdown. We have been teaching online during lockdown, but the problem arose with particularly the agriculture and the science engineering subjects, where the online class was not enough. The lab has to be conducted, the experiments have to be conducted on the farm station and so on. So we actually had to be satisfied with online teaching only because the University Grants Commission would not allow us to go for anything else for the time period. But once we got into the normal situation, we started talking about this blended learning. The idea, the concept has now been sold to the UGC. They are willing to, they have allowed us to go for this. But what happened, is student engagement in the online was not that good. I mean, some of them evaded, as pointed out already, and then assessment was the most difficult part. We didn't have really the softwares or the sophisticated ones to say have exam without unfair means and so on. So we felt that at least the exams could be conducted in the classroom. But then as we see it now, this blended learning is going to be the practice, not just because that the COVID is gone, but there are more than, say, teaching online. I mean, the students are interested in online learning. They are familiar with this internet and other things. The technical problem is not that much, but more important is the mindset of the teachers and their skill. So we have to train the teachers on how to make this online teaching more effective. But at the same time, when we are talking about blended learning, they are feeling their work is going to be double or so. So there is a question of motivating the teachers, preparing them for the kind of teaching that would be effective in blended learning. So now we have been trying to, say, design the courses in a way. We are already practicing outcome-based education, so that has given us an advantage. The learning outcomes are defined, and then we ask the teachers that you should decide which topics would be better online and which one would be better in class. In general, we say the hands-on practices should be better in the classroom, and we also say that it is much easier to motivate the students in the face-to-face interactions rather than online. So we have not yet started, we will be reserving these classroom meetings primarily for student motivation, providing them with hands-on practice, and as one of our panelists pointed out, that those who are not in a mode to, learn online would be evading, trying to pick them up, trying to counsel, and try to make sure that they get engaged. And we have been actually assigning them project work and other things online. But we will be giving them the first-hand exposure to a project work in the classroom and would follow them up online. And eventually we would ask them to present it either online or in class. So, say for example, the complex engineering problems, these are not amenable to, only online teaching. These have to be backed up with the practice in the classroom or in the lab or in the electrical station. So some of these things have to be designed in a way that it can ensure the effectiveness of learning. Actually, what I would say, the concept of blended learning has just started known to the academia in Bangladesh context. While the private universities, I am from a private university, we were ahead of the public universities in respect of online teaching. And then now the public universities are also thinking in that line. However, the challenge remains still the technology, the softwares, even the hardwares, even internet speed and other things. And also I would say the capability of students to buy, laptops or computers or even sometimes the smartphones. So there are many poor students, but what from our university we did, we wanted to give them either loan, student loan for purchasing computers or a smartphone, or would be giving some smartphones free so that they can participate. So that was the actions that we take during this COVID period. Now the students have realized the importance of using this online learning. They are getting prepared, and we're also trying to encourage them to use this for purpose. But the point that I was telling, that teachers, they have to give enough time for course design as well as consultation, and also we would say the role of the teacher should be one of coach and mentor, not just come into class, lecture, and go away. That days are over. That mindset has to be changed. Thank you very much for giving the floor.
Thank you, Professor Yap. I think Garth, many of the speakers, many of the panelists have mentioned this, starting with Dr. Katyal, that training teachers is really important, and I think most of us will agree. So coming to that point of how can we, so especially Garth, I know in Australia, in the United States, I know most of the university teachers, we have to go through a graduate certificate in university teaching, which I have to do myself as well. But I'm not sure that how many countries are following that kind of practices. And I know that certain countries, the lecturers, the scientists who are teaching in the tertiary education probably never received any formal teaching of how to teach. It's not about technology only. Even normal teaching. How do you know? Have that training of how to teach? So Garth, my question to you is, what kind of training should institution provide to the teachers in general as well, but also for, especially for designing for the blended learning? Garth, can you unmute Garth, technology people? Garth, are you unmuted or not yet? Can you unmute Garth, our online speaker? Okay, thank you.
Look, I think you touched on a very important point. One of my experiences when I was a Dean of Learning and Teaching was that you can design lots of really excellent professional learning activities for staff, and it will be the same staff who attend every time. Which means that there's always a proportion of the staff who are involved in learning and teaching activities who are not engaging with the training that we provide. So that means that for many staff, formal learning is not going to be the best option. So in addition to those formal learning, where we can train our ambassadors, our technology leaders, people who we know can take this out into the disciplines, I think it's then a matter of encouraging staff within the schools to adopt these technologies, and that comes through very much. I think a good example for me at the moment is the rise of generative artificial intelligence and its impact on assessment. And I apologise for bringing that up because it's the subject of every conversation in higher education at the moment. But it is obviously a major issue. And one of the things we're now going to be asking our staff to do is to rethink their approach to assessment, because many of the forms of assessment that we use, particularly those we developed during the COVID-19 pandemic, are potentially susceptible to students using generative artificial intelligence as to help them with those assessments. So how are we going to get those staff to actually engage with these processes? And that very much for me comes from taking a program level approach to these type things. Often in higher education, certainly in Australia, we're talking about, everyone has their subject that they teach, and that's a discrete unit. Whereas what we actually need to be looking at is a program level approach, so that we have these activities, these blended approaches built in across programs, so we can share activities, we can share resources, and help educate those staff who otherwise won't engage with the professional learning activities.
Thank you, Garth. Dr. Gunasekara, if I can come to you, what is your recommendation in terms of what sort of training the teachers would require and the institution should focus on?
Considering this an evolving process of education and the fact that we are all in this journey together, my own feeling is that we should involve both parties. There is a process called knowledge exchange that we are really keen about. And in knowledge exchange, it's not just knowledge transmission, but recognizing the other party in the conversation can also bring some learning back. So in trying to do this, we have, due to the fact that there is so much information out there in the domain, the fact that the teacher is the sole holder of knowledge is no longer a case. Knowledge is now available, and therefore it is the interpretation and the application of knowledge that varies from person to person, and the ability, the accessibility to apply it. And therefore, involving the end user, the student, the participant, in the discussions as to what works best for whom under what circumstances is what will take us forward.
Yep. Thank you very much. Dr. Solias, what would you say? What sort of training is going to be important?
I think it's important for all of us to realize, in essence, what we're saying here. The problems that we have in training the teachers is the same problem we have with the students, and that's motivation. And so if we are having problems with getting students to buy into the system, what do we do to get students to buy into the system? We kind of have to apply the same rules to teachers. I mean, this seems to be clearly a universal problem. I mean, are we talking theory X versus theory Y here, where you have people who will only engage in an activity if there's an extrinsic motivation versus people who will engage in an activity because they're intrinsically motivated? And so what we need to try to discover, and I'm not saying this is easy, is what can we do to make a instructor, a teacher, a lecturer, a professor want to change and adopt to this new environment, who might not be intrinsically motivated to do so? I don't think it's an easy question to answer, but I think that is the core of where the solution lies.
Dr. Katyal, you have already mentioned about it when in your address that training the teacher is going to be important. Would you like to add to that?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I suppose teacher training, as I said in my presentation earlier, is the key to success to introduce actually blended learning. And also it is important, as said by one of my panelists, that students also must be ready for accepting what teacher is telling, and also the kind of interactivity. I was working in Germany, and I found there that classroom teaching was followed by actually online participatory teaching, where the students will become teachers and teachers will become students. That method used to work very much. That was the best way to actually engage the students. And also, I suppose training must help or boost teachers-taught interactivity. Yes. This is, I suppose, key, the point which is made. Actually, this interactivity is not there. That now students also know more than teachers sometimes. Teachers definitely know less than students. So teachers have to direct actually what is the source of information from which they can draw that information, so that it becomes more interactive. It should actually engage them more outside classroom learning than inside classroom learning. If that happens, if teachers can inspire that thing, that will be the best thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mitchell, if I can come to you. So in terms of training, also for effective blended learning, but in terms of incorporating technology into that, so what would you say, what sort of training the institution should focus on for the teachers?
Yes, like what other colleagues have said already, it's not so easy to get our teachers to courses. So just before I answer this, I want to add a little bit how to get them motivated. There's one motivation we try, and it's quite successful, is that we do teaching awards. So we award our teacher. We can give them, in a way, money for their teaching because they already get paid. But when they're awarded, it's also important for the CV. And also when they want to become a professor, it's more and more important to be a good teacher. In the past, all you had to do was to be a good researcher and had a lot of publications, and that was it. And nowadays, teachers also have to reflect their learning. So when they apply for a professorship, they have to reflect their learning, and we help them. So we have a special teacher training how to do this assessment about their learning, philosophy in a way, yes. Back to the questions, we at our university offer a lot of trainings, not just for teacher, we start even earlier, also for the student workers. We call them tutors, so we have student working for the professor. So at all kind of level, for the student workers, for the professors, but also for the whole faculty. If they come to our unit and say we want to specialize in this, can you offer a course? Then we try to react very quickly and come up with professionals. Of course, we are not the only professionals. We buy them in a way. So to come and give these courses. And then we do all kind of different technical basic courses, advanced courses, for all these tools, and we have to quickly adapt, of course, because the tools are changing. So we have really to be quick. And then one of major points is the pedagogy. So we do all kind of different pedagogical trainings, starting with basics, starting with the learning, what is called, intended learning outcomes. And then we do all kind of different other things, like when it comes to digital diversity or the ethnical issues, or all kind of how to teach sustainable development and all this kind of stuff. So we offer a lot of courses, but of course we will not reach all of our teachers. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And also, you kind of indicated towards another issue that I wanted to discuss about is how do the institutions or the educators, they make sure that these programs, they are accessible to students coming from different background. Also, I think Dr. Sadraj, because you are engaging with so many vice chancellors, you mentioned here in India. So how can, the institution or the educators, they ensure that these blended learning, it is accessible and fair for all the students, regardless of their resources or background? What sort of things are you doing or discussing in that area?
We are doing a couple of things. First, we are sensitizing the leadership to have an institutional policy on blended learning. Not only on blended learning, a range of things, technology-enabled learning, technology-enabled assessment practices, and also open education resources framework, because it allows the faculty members to capitalize on open education resources that are already available in the open domain to adapt it to their conditions. So we provide a lot of training to the faculty members in the various aspects of blended learning, OER policy development, institutional policy development, and so on. But also we have come up with a template which is solely for the institutions, which is a blended learning policy template for education, higher education institutions, solely for them. So there is a kind of an action framework which the institutions can adapt to come up with their own policy, because policy drives action. Right. We also recognize that blended learning is not just about exposure to technology.
Yeah,
it's much more than that. It's all about the learning styles, recognizing the learning styles of individual learners and adapting to their styles, and also creating that personalized learning experience. So the whole idea of the instructional design and blended learning design is all about creating that learning experience for individuals to enable them to reach their outcomes. One thing is, the national education policy, the institutions would have their own vision and their own, outcomes as enshrined in their visionary documents. But every individual has an outcome. Every individual would want to become employable or entrepreneurial in his or her learning journey. Right. And in order to help the individual to define one's own learning journey, so that the learner is able to take ownership of learning process, you need to recognize the different learning styles and provide the options, various options for them to be engaged in a process whereby not only that learner is able to get the best quality input in the learning process, but also the student support services that are offered to students who are lagging behind, who need additional support, and so on. So come to Commonwealth of Learning, we have thousands of these toolkits available for you. We can extend it to you.
Thank you so much. And you really mentioned a very important point of individual approach, because different students, they have different capabilities, some students, and that's another advantage of blended learning, that some students, they are happy with the online content, but there are some students who are happy with in the classroom, interacting with teachers, and also interacting, as we know, with learning from the peers. So that's a very good point. Dr. Sugumar, would you like to add anything to that?
Now with the introduction of the flexibility in the national education policy, we have to consider this period as something like a transitional for a transformational learning. In fact, UGC has given a model to start with. In fact, they have given it as IPSIT model. That is, I stands for Identify Resources and Learner-Centered Activities. See, this is something that we have to, to start with. We have been talking more about educating our teachers, for which even UGC has come out with something. So this Identify Resources and Learner-Centered Activities is the first step towards that. And then, for improved learning outcome, one can just think about providing the resources to the students, like on an asynchronous mode, and announce activities on the learning management system. So this will help them to come prepared. And then again, the teacher's role is next about they say about the scaffolding or the support system that he has been mentioning about. How to provide the support system to the individual learners is something that we have to really think about. See, here is what the next I also stands for, that is identification of the learning gaps and the feedback. Here, feedback, again, the insist that it is not criticizing on the deficiencies, rather helping them to overcome those deficiencies. And finally, a sort of testing mechanism can be evolved. Again, in the national education policy, we are thinking about education which is going to be completely different from what is today. Like, it is going to be flexible and of quality. That means that the students, finally, when we evolve it to a level, it is that the students will pick the teachers and the timings. This is, something that we may not accept at the initial stage, but this is going to happen. If at all we are going to adopt it in true spirits. Then next is the needs and interest. So that means the students will be able to frame their courses. And they can also design their degrees, because the ABC provides for, almost like transfer of credits from one university to another, which means that they can design their degrees. It is not, but in agricultural education, I don't buy this argument at the moment. But then, this is what ultimately we are aiming at. And then the real word, study through any mode. You want to go to a classroom, go to a classroom. If you want to study through an online platform, please do that. If you have got a, blended learning module is there in the MOOC, take it up. Like anything can be possible. Again, the students are not going to take up exams when you assign, rather, they will only take up the exam when they are ready. Learning or exams on demand. On demand. So these are all something that we cannot avoid in the long run if we are going to adopt this national education policy. But in agricultural higher education, that's what we are discussing here. At the moment, are we ready for even the multiple entry exit? So do we have a framed strategy with which we do it? At the moment, no. But the universities have been given with a lot of autonomy to decide on that. So which means that we, educators have to brainstorm and come out with solutions, because it is all spelled out, whether it is for the conventional university setup or the specialized university setup. We are to follow this, which means that sooner or later, we have to come out with some solutions. Now that recently, when we are talking about empowering and capacity building of the teachers, now he has come out with a blended learning MOOC program, and also the NAM has introduced, recently for the first time, they have introduced 1-year course on technology of teaching for those who are into the field, because now in the agricultural universities, we don't have the teacher training program. But if we can send our people to learn, which can be always explored, and so that is all going to help us formulate the outcome that is expected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one more point, which is really important, that how do we know that how effective our learning or blending methodologies have been? So, Garth, coming to you again, and people in technology, can you help to unmute Garth? And Garth, how do the educational institution measure the effectiveness of learning, especially the blended learning programs? And what sort of changes then can be made into the blended programs to make it more successful and effective? Garth?
Yes, look, it's a really big question, and it's one of the big sort of issues currently discussed here in Australia is how do we actually benchmark our courses from one university to another so we can actually say, my agricultural science course, the graduates are equivalent to your agricultural science course. That's certainly something that the government regulator has given us a clear expectation that we will engage in that space. So I think that's a big question that needs to be addressed, and obviously part of that would be the effectiveness of our learning strategies. I think the feedback we're receiving from employers on our graduates is that our graduates have a good set of skills, but at the same time we have also seen a drift in some of the skills that the students have had as they've come through their degrees during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I don't think we can underestimate the impact that these different learning strategies can have, and ensuring that we find ways to actually appropriately address it. And that comes back to the point that was made very early in the panel around threshold standards and around assessment. And we've talked a lot about assessment and how do we actually benchmark our assessment to say, okay, we took a blended learning approach with this course, but the assessments were conducted in a way that was that we feel was appropriate with sufficient integrity. I think those are the big questions we need to address moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Garth. So, Dr. Gunasekara, I'm going to come to you because you started that very good conversation around having the threshold level. So, how do we measure that effectiveness of blended learning?
Thank you. Let's start by asking what is the purpose of education? Yeah. Because if we are talking of effectiveness, we need to know the end result. And to me, education delivers individual empowerment and social development. Yeah. And therefore, if we are really going to measure the success of education, we need to measure it by those two parameters. How do we carry the individual along, and how does that individual contribute to the betterment of the society? So, to me, I think this is where the importance of contextualization of education lies. If we were to teach something to a student, and the student feels, yes, I know something new, but that new knowledge has no relevance to the local circumstances, we are either forcing the student to live a life of discontent or migrate. And that is what we have been doing all the time. Instead, and especially in agriculture, we have this amazing opportunity to make the learning real, to give the opportunity for the student to recognize its value and the immediate application in the local context itself. And that, if we can create that, that will drive the effectiveness that we seek. And if I were to very quickly apply this to the Sustainable Development Goals, we keep talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, the objectives, the tasks, and so on. We forget that in 2015, when they were coined, there were two overriding principles that everybody promised. One was leave no one behind and reach those furthest behind first. Yeah. My fear is that in the process of technology driving education, we may actually increase the gap if we do not cater for those most behind first. Yeah. And the effectiveness should be measured at that point. How far back have we reached to make the impact?
Thank you. Very good point. Solinias, if I can have your opinion on what do you think about the effectiveness, how to measure it?
Firstly, I think we have to recognize that regardless of the means by which we deliver a course, if we have defined good objectives and good outcomes for that course, the means by which we deliver are irrelevant. The objectives should still be met regardless of the means. If one of the objectives of the course is I need to learn HTML and build a web page, we measure that by seeing if the student has learned HTML and can build a web page. If the objective is to be a better presenter, then if the student then becomes a good presenter, we have achieved the objectives. I think if we do, The one exception perhaps to that rule is if we look at the objectives and the objectives really did not take into account a mixed environment or an online environment, we may want to reassess them to make the objectives a little more global. But short of that, the key, I think, is to recognize what are the strengths and purposes of online learning versus face-to-face. It's really an existential question. Do we really need a blended environment? That's a question that we have to constantly ask ourselves. And the answer is yes, for several reasons, because there are things that we can do in a blended environment or a pure online environment that we simply cannot do face-to-face. You know, face-to-face is a preferred method of communication. Why? Because humans desire three things from communication: information transfer, information richness, and social presence. Well, we cannot get that level of social presence online that we can face-to-face. It does not exist. It may never exist. But if we don't get the information transferred at all, then we don't get any value either. And so if somebody in Australia cannot come to my class in Baltimore, Maryland, yes, you're not getting the same information richness, you're not getting the same social presence that if you were in Baltimore, but you're not getting the information either, are you? So this to me is the key. Can we exploit what online does that face-to-face doesn't do? Mm-hmm. And that's how we measure success, regardless of what our objectives are.
Thank you very much. I think it's been a great discussion. And before we end this panel discussion, we've got last 5 minutes, and I want to give opportunity to all the panel members to give your final comments about this whole session on the strategies for blended learning. So, Professor Miab, I'm going to come to you, please.
I would like to add another dimension. We have been talking of motivating the students and teachers, but the top management of university needs to be motivated first.
Yep.
They have to invest in technology, they have to invest in teacher development and so on. Yep. Now, I'm talking from my experience in Bangladesh, particularly in the private universities, where, I mean, the top management, the board of directors or is a board of trustees must be convinced that blended learning is a better way of achieving learning effectiveness, and that you need to invest in IT, in facilities development, and also in teacher development and so on. So that part has to be addressed. Even in public universities, although, for example, UCC here is far ahead than I would say compared to Bangladesh. They have been giving a lot of guidelines and so on. In our case, it is not so. And then, even in public universities, the syndicate or say the Senate, these people are again not so much aware about the need for this, and then they don't realize that we'll be behind, if they don't invest in this kind of activities and resources. So that dimension has to be taken care of also.
Thank you. Dr. Gunasekara, any final comments?
I must thank the organizers. I must thank the organizers of this conference. And one of the nicest things that happened this morning was when Dr. Werner pointed out the difference between a platform and an ecosystem, and said an ecosystem is about values. And I want to end there, because please do not lose the value. I come from the medical field and I teach medicine. We have lost the trust of our people because we got so specialized. Today, people don't believe what we say, and we are coming back to those values. And the values are equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization. The word indigenization is so important. And in agriculture, you have all those values. So even as you embark on this journey, I'm not saying medicine went ahead of you, but I love the fact that you are planning and trying to future-proof what you're trying to do in India. India has the tremendous opportunity to use the digital world but not lose its indigenous speciality. And my plea is, don't lose your values in search of technical expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Salnias, final comments, quick 1 minute, please.
Okay. I'd like to quote my old economics professor who once said, education is the world's only perverse good. The more we spend, the less we want. And I actually pushed back on that argument, and I said that's because what students are spending the money on is not education, it's the degree. And I think regardless, again, of how we deliver the message, I mean, again, if I could quote, paraphrase Oscar Wilde, the one thing we learned from the online, forced online environment, from the lockdown, there's only one thing worse than coming to class, and that's not coming to class. The students want to avoid the classroom at all possible, but they have discovered that if I have to learn somewhere, I'd much rather learn in the classroom. And so can we find a happy medium that motivates students regardless of the medium, so that what they want is the education and not just the degree?
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Katyal, final comments.
Thank you. My final comment is that blended learning concept or ecosystem which we want to create for effectiveness or strategy we want to prepare, the most important factor would be to make a need analysis. That is it really required?
Yeah.
If it is required, in what shape is it required? And also the other part is that what is the kind of relevance of blended learning? Is it social? Is it practical? Or is it environment? Because I'm talking from agriculture point of view. So that relevance description, or that what is need to be achieved, the goal setting, what is called, that is again important. And my third point is that we should see that how this can be achieved. Now here comes the need, whether it is classroom teaching or whether it is an online teaching or a blended way. And this need analysis, I suppose, is the one which is key to succeed with the blended learning, that what kind of environment, what kind of platform, what kind of, you may call ecosystem you want to create. Just understand what is the need, what is the relevance of blended learning for India. That's my point.
Yep. Thank you. Michelle, if I can come to you, your final thoughts.
For me, the teacher training and the individual and tailored support for the teacher in designing the course and also in running the course is essential. And of course, the technology is a prerequisite, but the pedagogy is, for me, the key. So we should focus on this.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Sadraj, please, your final comments or thoughts.
I think three things will happen going forward. First is this idea of survival of the fittest. Blended, there is no option here. Blended is mandatory. The national education policy clearly says the future is blended. Prime Minister Modi mentioned future is blended. So education is likely to be blended, so we can't run away. But with regard to the exit and entry policies, and the 50% credits could be accumulated from the anchor institutions, and the other 50% could be window shopped. 25% window shopped, 25% through apprenticeship schemes would only mean that if you teach well, you have millions of students. If you don't teach well, you don't have students, So survival of the fittest is the first change that would take place. The second change that would take place is technology will take over many of the mundane tasks that we are now undertaking. Education administration, admission tests, evaluation, assessment. Gyan AI is a very good tool which the National University of Singapore is using to assess the summative assessments, assignments of students, thousands of these. Today, if as a teacher you were to assess 1,000 assignments within a day, you really need at least a month to assess such a lot of summative assessments. But AI tool does it in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So we are going to witness a major change with regard to the digitalization in terms of education administration, and a variety of tasks that we were doing in a subjective manner would be done objectively through ICTs. The third change, the final change that needs to come into play, that's where the educators have to really think hard, is are we going to continue to teach just the subjects, the substantive knowledge, or are we going to also embed the 21st century skills, soft skills, communication skills, entrepreneurship skills, so that when our students go out of our classes, our universities and higher education systems, do not go out just as an MSc agriculture graduate, but an agriculture entrepreneur, a businessman, a person who has the ability to collaborate, contribute, and also to immerse into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Garth, I'm going to come to you, and technology people, if you can unmute Garth, but before that, Dr. Sugumar, your final comments.
Blended learning is going to bring in more skills than what our graduates are now acquiring, in addition to their subject domain. No doubt about it, and so we are going to have the blended learnings to stay. But whatever we try to bring in as through technology, make it equitable, and it is not only to the privileged. In our agriculture education especially, we should admit that the students are from diverse background, and providing the right blend of technology and resources for the needy is also required. So that has to be imbibed into our system so that everybody gets what is due. So technology is going to stay, but I'm sure you'll all agree to the quote that technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. So we are going to have this transformation happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last but not the least, Garth, any final comments?
Look, I think it's been clear. Listen, we've had panelists here from all over the world, and nothing that anyone has said has been a surprise to me. It's all things that I can relate to. I think it's clear that no matter where we are in the world, we have the same opportunities, we have the same challenges in this environment. And for me, that's why meetings like this one are so crucial, because it gets us out of our discipline bubbles where we might only talk to science. I might only talk to biochemists. But by hearing from people from different disciplines, different countries, it really highlights the opportunity we have to work together to develop very effective blended learning strategies and technologies that I think will address some of those challenges we have around access and engagement, and hopefully allow us to deliver really high quality education in agriculture and everywhere.
Thank you, Garth. You actually have simplified my job to conclude everything now. And but you mentioned a very good point that Dr. Paroda also mentioned this morning. The multidisciplinary approach, I agree with you, is very, very important. So I think please join me to thank all our panelists for sharing their thoughts with us. I think we all agree that blended learning is presenting us great opportunity, but here is the time that let's work together, as Dr. Agarwal very rightly had pointed out this mission for this conference, that let's collaborate, because I think for blended learning to be successful, it is going to be important that we design carefully these activities. We make sure that the activities, they align with the learning outcomes. As our panelists mentioned, the training of the teachers is going to be very, very important. The motivation and engagement of the teachers and the students is going to be very important. And Professor Ria mentioned the role of institutions and our leaders, whether it is vice chancellors or directors of the institute, that they need to have this vision to have a blended learning and provide the sources and also create the infrastructure which is required for blended learning. With that, I will hand over to the co-chairs to conclude the session, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chauhan. Before concluding, I thank all the panels and Dr. Chauhan for conducting and doing our job very easy. But I see in the audience there are big peoples, So I request Dr. Gautam is there, Dr. Nazir Vice Chancellor is there. If they want to add something, whatever the panels have been given, and extra anything they want to add in the discussions. We have very less time, already time has passed, so.
Thank you, Dr. Jha, caring for the captive audience also. Thank you very much. Well, it was very interesting session. I commend the energy of Johan for standing there and also taking note and are taking quiz of all of you very nicely. And from high evaluation, all of you have passed. Now come to specifically for some comments from my side. Well, we are not new to this, the both boards of education in this country. We have even universities. What you call ICBLE is one very important university which had developed many courses, and they are delivering a lot of courses. Good reputation. There are state universities which are also imparting the same thing. If I have to draw a lesson from that, they really have professional courses, they have degree courses, and they have a system of evaluation put in place. That is the, you can say raw system of working without use of the kind of tools we have mentioned just now. When these students go to the jobs, they are not taken seriously. So my suggestion, number one, as somebody indicated, what is the policy for instruction? That will be very, very critical. Universities need certain and, acceptable and adaptable system, replicable. That is one thing where I think Commonwealth of Learning gentleman has very nicely put in. So we have to look into a very, very effective guidelines to put in place the blended system in place. And the experience from the open universities, ICBLE and others, will be quite helpful. We have to learn from that. The second is that where you do it. In many of the recruitment and policy, promotions rules, there is no mention of that even the open learning is also acceptable in the rules. We create a mess. And that mess has to be cleaned before it is put to the people. So that is where we are simultaneously, there has to be improvement in the recruitment, promotion, all these things. Sometimes persons are not accepted. No, if you have not done degree with, let us say, PhD degree with thesis, we give half the marks. So we have to see the whole gamut. I'm simply pointing out that this is, once we are, we are decided that we have to go in for a blended system. The reasons are explained. I need not to explain on those aspects. But to make it very, very certain and very, very effective, we need to have these two things put in place. And it is not a one-time job. You have to keep on doing as the dean's committees are going on in case of curricula development in agriculture and so on. Then, of course, the cost. People mentioned that you have to have the three things: the infrastructure, the capacity of the teacher, and the receptivity of the student. These three mixed together, and the enabling environment through whatever guidelines are there. I know that we offered courses during Corona time to the students, but it was a horrible experience. Teachers don't know what they have evaluated. Students don't know what far they have been passed. So I am giving not a dismal picture, I am giving a picture to improve ourselves. It's good to say goody goody to everybody. It's wonderful, everybody is happy. So you'll be in the panel all the time if you give good recommendation and keep Anuradha in smiling mode. That is wonderful. But the problem is that we have to be very, very honest to the system. We are evolving it, and I take it like this. Please don't go in for taking all the courses in the blended mode. Classify. There are certain courses which can be taken in blended mode, in the online mode, where practicum is not required, where you don't need face-to-face interaction and so on. So that is where I think we have to make a choice. And then there are many things which I have noted down, but you people have confused me so much to not to conclude this with the remarks that this is a good initiative. Learn from whatever systems we have in place. Do the need analysis, what is the need, what Dr. Katyal always highlights, and what is the need? What are the courses which will be more effective through the offline mode or online mode? And I think this, the gentleman from medical side has made a very, very relevant point. In agriculture also the same thing. In medicals, if you treat people like that, if you keep operation only online, then you will prescribe online. And the man will die, and nobody will be there to punish. So this is what I am saying, that these are good things which should be taken, but make very effective guidelines, how to operate. Very difficult to, if you give, there will be a lot of litigation. Somebody will say, I have done well, he has not done well. So if the guidelines are there, I think our life will be more comfortable. And teachers, the training is utmost important. Please take care of, these are the things which we have to build in the thing. And of course, making them useful. The employers must accept them, the acceptability part. So that role comes with the participation with the user departments, the people from the public and private sector. That will help in really improving the courses. I have gained a lot of things, and it was a wonderful day. And hopefully I did not get any sleep because I did not feel like sleepy. Because you are so attractive and so useful people kept us alive and kept us happy. Thank you all for wonderful interaction. It was enough. Thank you very much.
So this was not the online interaction. This is physical, so keeping intact. Dr. Nazir, you want to say anything?
Yes,
just a few minutes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Jasab. And Gautam sir will also rightly conclude many things. But what I would say here, that when we talk about the blended learning, combining the physical and virtual world. And in 21st century, we believe now that the education has to be an outcome-based education. What we in India have been doing so far is, churning the qualified graduates with the degrees and taking a degree at the end of a graduation time, 3, 4, 5 years, as a receipt of the time and the money he has spent for it. So the goal is the outcome-based education. And when we are in this world, which is driven with the technology, the teacher has to find his relevance in this Google age. The information is available to the student through this explosion of knowledge and information. And the students sting the class, and every student has a mobile in his hand, and teacher would keep on saying certain things, and the student would keep on Googling. And if a teacher is not relevant to the student, they don't find interest in the teacher. And ultimately what happens, they will skip the classes. Next day and the third, fourth day, they won't come to the class. I believe that if we have to just make this whole blending learning very effective, and many panelists said that it is the teacher first whom we have to say that he has to come as a motivational now in the class. He has to be more, aware about the technologies happening around him, and he has to be now an inspirational, for the students. Otherwise, sharing information what used to be in our times is not the job of the teacher. And I believe, many countries are now trying to believe that chat PGT. One is this ICT information, Google, but now chat PGT is coming. You just type certain few questions, it will give you all the answers. So that is the challenge, before all the educationists of today's time. And rightly said by all the panelists that an ecosystem has to be created in the universities. But let me tell you from the perspective of the Jammu and Kashmir, a small state in the hills of India, we are trying to just now, from the classroom, we are teaching the students in the classroom, we are trying to now reach to the farmers. A farmer who is not well educated, but then we want to just redefine the farmer, to a champion farmer, and wherein we want to just empower him with the knowledge and technology. And so many people are there and so many farmers, almost 70% of the people in the Jammu and Kashmir are in India, almost 40, 50, 60% are still engaged in agriculture. How do we educate them? So technology has a role, and we in the Jammu and Kashmir are going to take a lead to see that every farmer we educate through this tool, the technological tool, inform him, educate him, and then of course he needs certain some time for contact classes, and we are creating a platform and a mechanism that after he goes through some kind of a skill course, we leave him a scope for having some kind of contact classes, maybe at the university or some of the developmental departments. So it is going to be transformational throughout the world, but in India we are moving very fast. India is one among the few countries who are really going fully digital. And reaching a farmer in Himalayas through this technology is one such example. I believe we have the prospects are bright. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nazir. Anyone, one or two persons want to say anything or in addition to things? There is one. Yeah, please. 1 minute.
Thank you so much. The question, I am Prasad here. I was the former Vice Chancellor and I'm also the AGPC member of this particular NHEP program. A wonderful discussion took place. Now the question is the blending. How much of the blending should be done? Should be 50-50, 60-40 or 70-30? Because it varies from discipline to discipline and from subjects. And as Dr. Soryas told, is very relevant as long as you don't have a personal touch with the student. Probably that feeling of the student-teacher relationship, if you miss on that, probably you are not able to understand and appreciate all the students who are present in the class. So the online system would try to miss out on some of the students who have not been able to come because you take all of them in the same platform. And that could hinder the students' progress. So in order to do this, we have to develop a sort of a strategy. What should be the level of this blending we should do, and to what extent on various programs? Now, over the period of time, since we took off with nobody knowing how to go for an online coaching or online teaching, teachers didn't know, students didn't know, but we have now taken off. We have come to a particular level. Now, let us see how best we can train them. And that question was asked time and again, Dr. Chavan said, how should we train them? Now, we have developed over the period of time lots of course materials. Online course materials are available. Large database has been developed. Let this be used as a tool to educate the teachers. Now, there are some online teachers who have not been very good in the classroom, but have been very good on online. So why can't we use them as the resource person, try to use them to educate and have some sort of like workshop for the teachers from each university should take it up and train the teachers so that they also are coped up to address the students better online. So this is a small, last thing, a small study was done in Karnataka by a conventional university, and they found that a combination of 50-50 worked well, because of the simple reason there was time for the teacher to communicate to the students personally as well as online. So a combination has to be developed over a period of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. One hand was here in front somewhere. Yeah, please.
Sir, myself, Dr. Sudhanand Prasad Lal from RPCAU Pusa. Sir, my question is that 54% of the generation Z or G is unable to concentrate due to use of technology. And we also realize that in traditional classroom ecosystem also, due to the hangover of the technology they have been using a whole night, the students, they are unable to focus in traditional classroom ecosystem also. So in this blended ecosystem or this online ecosystem, how they will focus? That is the major concern for Generation Z, sir. That we have to develop certain framework also, sir, to do it.
Thank you, friends. I think, yeah, please, last now.
India is having a multi-institute education system, which includes public as well as private. Education is a birthright and everyone must be rewarded with it. At the same time, there comes the question when blended ecosystem will be there, each and every student will get opportunity to learn new things from any corner of the world. So these private institutes which are doing it for money's sake, so won't they cause hindrance in this system? Because their business will stop, so-called business of education will stop. So there might be some hindrance by these private institutes for all this ecosystem to come into existence. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I wanted to respond to a very important question that someone asked. How do we get the learners or students to concentrate? I think the biggest problem with blended learning, open distance and e-learning in general, tomorrow I'll have a talk late in the afternoon or early evening. I'll present a case study from a country and I'll speak to some of the issues. But for today, I just wanted to say that the biggest challenge is that most of the institutions, sometimes even countries, and ministries, they'll go into blended learning without knowing what blended learning is. And I think one of the panelists, either this afternoon or both this afternoon and in the morning as well, early in the morning, pointed to that fact. So the problem is that people go into blended learning thinking they're doing blended learning, yet it is not. So blended learning is not taking or trying to do what you do in the classroom otherwise, online or using a virtual. It's a different sub-discipline, if I can call it so. So the problem is that we go into it without at least consulting adequately with those who know. So there's a lot of capacity building that needs to take place, and there's a need for policy before or as you implement blended learning. That is a good starting point. The rest can follow, so we can discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Agrawal sahab, aap kuch कहना चाह रहे थे?
I just want to compliment all of you for giving this very good points, and I think a lot of good recommendations and critical views have emerged from this. But let me just tell you one thing. Just this blended learning ecosystem which we are going to develop, it is only an option. Like today, if there was no blending mode of meeting, we could not have the advantage of Dr. Garth. So though we requested physically everybody to come, but if there is no option, like when we are going for some tour, physically if we are not there, then we can have the option of coming to the meeting. So using this platform, there is no better option than the physical learning. But in case the student is willing to know something, has some interest to know something from some distant teacher. So that blending is for that purpose, what we are proposing through this platform. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. I think now I should close because we are already 50%, 30 minutes late. So though Dr. Gautam has given us the pass mark, but we are now failing because of the bad management of the time. So now I request Dr. Pandeyji to summarize from his side whatever you want to conclude.
Thank you, Dr. Jha. Well, everything is said and almost all points have been covered. You see, this blending is not a new one. We have the blending of our education from Gurukul to again past to present, again further past to present, again knowledge with the technology. So blending, it is an evolving process. Today also we are going to have this blended learning, and that perfect example of blended learning, the people sitting over here who never have gone for the training or classroom for learning this mobile phone. You learn from your own. That is the, so well said. Thanks to Corona that is over. This is the, really that time, I remember before Corona period, we were not accepting anything which was online. Not accepting. The e-courses, I was national coordinator. When it was started developing during 2006, everybody was talking, what kind of these courses are being developed? Who will use? But today you see how and how much it was used during this Corona period. So again, thanks to our National Education Policy Government of India 2020, that where this kind of blending learning and then this kind of blended education that has been given a very important role. One point has very clearly emerged, that is until unless we have a very well-designed entire things and well-structured, that is very much required when we are developing any course material. Already we have the textbook and other books. The same thing we have to encourage how to bring that online materials. And in this regard, already Gautam sir has mentioned, IGNO and we all from ICR, a lot of work that have been done as far as these online course materials are concerned. Certainly we need, I remember that time when these courses was started, faculty were not aware about how to touch the mouse. How to touch the mouse. They were not knowing how to use the mouse. But today they are capable over the period. Certainly it has changed and it will change. And now, due to this kind of evolving process, today we are dreaming the digital university. Digital university. And time has come when you will see the digital university. So design and the structure of those course materials, then availability and creation of knowledge, and then that accessibility to make access. Still today, if you see the colleges which are in the rural areas, they don't get any continuous internet connectivity even. They are facing. So how to make them? So that is a very important. Evaluation and assessment of both student as well as teacher. That should come very categorically. Capacity building, until unless the capacity building, and under our national education policy also, this capacity building has given a very, very important role. And one big component is there. So in this blended learning also, this capacity building is very much required. A lot of we have to talk about what kind of training is required, what is the need of those trainings, to whom, what kind of training will be required. And finally, I'll not take much time, the policy interventions. The policy in totality with complete convergence which can be sustainable, which can be doable, which can be acceptable, and which can be implementable. If we do, certainly I think that our education, the quality of education, and this blending learning, that is going to, and this under our strategy, if we'll consider these points, certainly, and very important one at the last, that is the sharing and caring by the partnerships. So partnership and linkages, that will be very required, because many things, same thing is being created by different people. So if you can have a node of the kind of node, the capacity building centers, who will prepare what, who will create what, and that quality again check. So these are the few points I wanted to just put. Now with this, I express my sincere thanks and gratitude for the organizers for giving me the opportunity, and thanks to our Dr. Jha Sahab for giving me this opportunity in this session. Thank you all the panelists for their very good deliberations and very good points.
Thank you, Pandit sir. Friends, now it is concluding, and I am not going to repeat because of the things which have already been told. One thing is clear, that we are here sitting because of the corona. Necessity is the mother of the inventions. So that blending and online teaching has come because of the corona. So we should thank them. And another important thing that has emerged, that is correct, that we should not go for a blending by blinding ourselves. Blending of education should not be done by blinding ourselves. Course to course and even subject to subject, it will vary. That is the most important things, and that should be taken care of during the making the policy. That policy is of course required, but how much policy should be there, that should also be not so tight, so that teacher and professors cannot move here and there for changing their course, curricula and practicals and other things. Here there is a teaching and practicals. We are not talking at all practicals. How practical can be conducted when students are not being able to attend the classes in practical rooms, in the fields, in case of agriculture, in engineering, in the workshop, and so on and so forth, in medicines. Already Dr. Sahab has told. So how can be done, that has to be think of. Then one important thing I would like to highlight, that now the teacher selection is also important, on which none of the speakers have pointed out. You see, right person for a right job, I usually very frequently speak, the right person should be selected for right job at the right time. That is the missing many times. So the world is now different for teaching. So who are selecting the teacher in the university, in the school, or in anywhere, that point should be kept in the mind, that whether they are able to, whether they have the insight capacity to teach in the blending teaching system or not. That is. Then one important thing, Dr. Prasad said, that how much blending, that is very much important. Even in chemical engineering, our engineering or medicine, blending index is there. How much miscibility, how much it can be mixed with what subject, that has to be determined. And it is not a simple job. It takes years. So again, I will say that things will be generated, knowledge will be generated, and that blending index and extent will be generated its own. I think no one has done any experiment, so it will come. So that I think that slowly we will be reaching to the regenerative type of teaching and experiments. And education system, of course, has to be regenerative, and teacher has to come in the form of blending system, and that is required. But again, subject to subject, that would vary. So these are my final comment. I have not repeated any material which has been told the panelists and the audience. I thank to Dr. Agrawal and his team and the organizers all to giving me this opportunity, and of course Dr. Chauhan to give us the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, co-chairs and panelists. I think we will all agree that this has been an extremely enriching session. In fact, since morning, we have had a great panel plenary session, inaugural session, and now this panel discussion. In fact, when we started planning for this conference, the idea was to pick the brains and share the experience of people already working in the blended learning ecosystem. And at the conclusion of the first day itself, I would like to say that our vision has come to a reality. We are getting diverse views, great suggestions, and I am sure we'll come out with very good recommendations that will lead to the policy required to run the blended learning ecosystem in higher agriculture education in India and the world over.
दुनिया का ज्ञान, ये ज्ञान की दुनिया